ultimately, the press conference finally did start. The accuser who came forward today was a woman who worked at the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation in the mid-1990s. She said after losing her job at the NRA's foundation, she met Mr. Cain in Washington to ask him for help in getting rehired or for getting another job. She then alleged that Mr. Cain made an aggressive and unwanted sexual advance toward her.
He suddenly reached over and he put his hand on my leg, under my skirt, and reached for my genitals. He also grabbed my head and brought it towards his crotch. I was very, very surprised and very shocked. I said, "What are you doing? You know I have a boyfriend. This isn't what I came here for." Mr. Cain said, "You want a job, right?" I asked him to stop, and he did.
The Herman Cain campaign responded to this. Actually, they sort of pre-responded to this, putting out a statement during that press conference, which said that Mr. Cain has never harassed anyone. Quote, "All allegations of harassment against Mr. Cain are completely false." There are a number of these allegations now, depending on how you count. This was either the 6th woman or the 7th woman who alleges that she was harassed, or who was allegedly harassed, by Mr. Cain. The first 2 were women employed by the National Restaurant Association when Mr. Cain ran the association. Both of them, after complaining formally to the association, were separated from their jobs and given cash settlements of tens of thousands of dollars in exchange for agreeing to not speak about the incidents in the future. A conservative talk show host in Iowa has also come forward and said that he witnessed inappropriate behavior from Mr. Cain toward 2 female members of his radio show staff in Iowa. A longtime Republican pollster who now does work for Rick Perry has described witnessing very inappropriate behavior from Mr. Cain toward a woman in a restaurant in the Washington, D.C. area in the late 90s. What's unclear in the counting of the total number of women here is whether that, the woman seen being mistreated at the restaurant, whether that is the same woman who is also described by the Associated Press as a former National Restaurant Association employee who says she was harassed by Mr. Cain but who never received a settlement as a result of that. All of those allegations preceded the new one today, which itself was, of course, preceded by the Howard Stern show taking over the entire proceeding. Bleep, bleep, bleep you, I'm fine. In addition to the Mr. Cain has never harassed anyone statement from the Herman Cain Art Project today, the Herman Cain Art Project also tweeted a welcome to the campaign message to the attorney who's representing the new accuser. The tweet said, "Welcome to the campaign. What took you so long?" And it included a link where people can donate to the Herman Cain Art Project in Iowa. The Herman Cain Art Project has been bragging about how much money the sexual harassment allegations have helped them raise. They say they raised $2.8 million total between July and September of this year. That was before the sexual harassment allegations started coming out. And then once Cain supporters learned of all these allegations of Herman Cain sexually harassing women, the numbers just took off. $2.8 million raised in 3 months before the allegations, and they've raised almost that much since. About $2 million since the allegations have come out. There is an old, well-stoked conservative paranoia that any allegation against a conservative candidate has just been made up by a media that is out to get them. In this case, the Herman Cain Performance Art Project has sort of brilliantly come up with this satire, and sort of brilliantly made that seem as ridiculous as possible, because we're not talking about 1 accuser here, or 2 accusers here, or 3 accusers here, or 4 accusers here, but rather 6 or maybe even 7 different women, all of whom are apparently part of a liberal media conspiracy. Please send your cash checks or money orders right away. On Friday night, the artist formerly known as Herman Cain also made fun of the other major scandal afflicting his campaign right now. The allegations that while his manager, his campaign manager, the smoking guy, was working for a Koch brothers conservative activist group, that group used money from unknown donors to illegally fund Mr. Cain's campaign.
This may be a breaking news announcement for the media. I am the Koch brothers' brother from another mother. Yes, I'm their brother from another mother, and proud of it.
That's the response to the scandal so far. Today in Washington, another watchdog group has asked the IRS to look into the alleged illegal funding of the Cain campaign by unknown donors funneling it through a Koch brothers linked organization. Again, while his campaign manager was running a state chapter of the Koch brothers' conservative activist group, Americans for Prosperity, the group's own financial records show it apparently illegally funding Herman Cain's campaign, illegally paying for campaign stuff, for things like Herman Cain going to a Koch brothers event in Oklahoma, and Herman Cain's campaign manager, the smoking guy, being flown to D.C. to meet with one of the Koch brothers and the head of their Americans for Prosperity group, Tim Phillips. Tim Phillips, as a refresher here, has actually been a guest on this show a couple of times before. Jack Abramoff, the Republican Uber lobbyist who went to jail during the Bush administration, Jack Abramoff is now out of federal prison and promoting his new book about his crimes. Among the things that Jack Abramoff did in Washington was that he got guys like Tim Phillips and Ralph Reed. Remember Ralph Reed, the Christian Coalition guy? Jack Abramoff got those guys, worked with those guys to dupe conservative voters into supporting the interests of Jack Abramoff's lobbying clients. So they'd get conservative voters who hated gambling, for instance, to oppose some specific gambling legislation. Not because they were going to stamp out gambling by doing that, but because that would help eliminate the competition for the casinos that these guys were working for. Ralph Reed is supposed to be a Christian leader, right? So it couldn't look like he was being paid by the casinos. So instead, they just laundered the money to Ralph Reed through a conservative activist group to make it look like it was all politics and not just about money. In this case, the group through which they laundered the money was the Grover Norquist Tax Reform Group. So again, if you follow the money, it sort of looks like conservative activism. It looks ideological. It looks principled, right? The money is laundered through conservative activism. But really, it's just what some rich company wants and is willing to pay for. Tim Phillips and Ralph Reed got Christians to write letters in support of keeping the Made in the USA label on clothes that were being made in the Mariana Islands, a U.S. Commonwealth. Clothes that were being manufactured in near slave labor sweatshop conditions. Conditions that included things like forced prostitution and forced abortions among the destitute workers who were there. How did they get Christians? How did they get, values voters, conservative Christian Americans to write letters supporting that? They mailed those Christians materials that said the workers in the Mariana Islands were being exposed to the teachings of Jesus while they were working there. That was the Jack Abramoff scam, right? That's Tim Phillips, who now runs the Koch brothers group, Americans for Prosperity. That was the Ralph Reed scam, right? Ralph Reed now runs the Faith and Freedom Coalition. All the Republican candidates except John Huntsman went to the Ralph Reed Faith and Freedom Coalition event in Iowa last month. This was the podium. There's Ralph Reed. Remember now, he was Abramoff's guy, right? So there's his logo, Faith and Freedom Coalition you see there. But what's that other logo behind him? The Iowa Energy Forum. Hold on a second. Quick Google search reveals that the Iowa Energy Forum is a project of the American Petroleum Institute. Right? So that's what these guys do. That's who these guys are. That's the Values Voter Summit of Ralph Reed, brought to you by Big Oil. Ralph Reed and Tim Phillips did not go to prison like Jack Abramoff did, but they were part of the Jack Abramoff scam to get conservative voters to do something that they thought was ideologically sound, at least ideologically motivated, right-wing activism. But it was really just what some big corporate funder wanted and was willing to pay for. Iowa Energy Forum. Oh yeah, and faith, too. That's what Jack Abramoff did before he went to prison. That's what Ralph Reed is doing now, still. And now there's the Herman Cain Art Project, a charismatic, purportedly very conservative purported candidate who does not know that letting a woman decide if she wants to have an abortion or not is not allowed if you're pro-life. Candidate who has never heard of neoconservatism, who answered this way when he was asked just this weekend about Medicare.
You go first, Newt.
That's only fair.
The Herman Cain Art Project, which seems to be a conservative cause, which is attracting lots of conservative support, is something that has no campaign staff, right? No substantial staff of its own. It appears to be bankrolled, possibly illegally, by the billionaire owners of the largest privately held oil and chemical company in the country, whose political group, Americans for Prosperity, is run by a former associate of Jack Abramoff. Hey, conservative voters, I know that you're not my biggest fans, although I know some of you watch because I can tell from the hate mail. Listen, this is meant as advice, and I mean it in a big-hearted way. I mean it in a legitimate way. I'm a liberal. I would love for Herman Cain to be the Republican Party's nominee for president this year. Part of me tells me I should shut up, right? But just as an American, if I'm speaking to you as a conservative voter, I just want you to know, these guys are pros. If you're one of those people who wrote a letter saying you wanted the Mariana Islands workers to get made in the USA labels, because that was what Jesus would have wanted since they were getting exposed to the teachings of Jesus, and then you found out that according to our own government's investigation, those people were being subject to forced prostitution and forced abortions, and you were just duped because somehow Ralph Reed got your address as a values voter. If you would have regret about that, consider this about the Herman Cain campaign. These guys have done it before. They know what they are doing. And they now appear to be reassembling the old team to give it one more try. And that one more try is you.